Good afternoon everyone, it's Debbie and Rolo here, and today we're going to conclude the chapters about Hope, the little girl in a coma in a London children's hospital, and hopefully Rolo can weave a little bit of his very special Jack Russell magic. So here we go. The next night no winged messenger came a-tapping, so I decided to wait until midnight and then try the Chilvester Passage again. It had been 2 days since I'd met Hope, and I wanted to see how she was and how her recovery was progressing. I really wanted to see those eyes open to see if they were blue. I reached the church at 5 to 12 and saw that the High Street was deserted. I entered the church again under the west door, shoving the loose plank again, and stood in front of the dog mural, listening for the chimes. Exactly as it happened the first time, the outline of the dog blurred, and I found myself once again staring into the gaping hole. I didn't hesitate this time, however, and jumped straight in. "How did you know I'd be here?" I asked the unmistakable silhouette of Yulia as she struggled to light her lantern. "Athelstan sent me," she replied, simply, as if that explained everything. Once more I found myself in awe of the guardian of the time tunnel and the keeper of the forest, and his ability to just know. I used the same means as before, i.e. my nose, to open the Talbot Cafe sign and exit the Chilvester Passage, and just managed to jump clear before it shut fast behind me, almost catching my tail. Luckily, the streets were just as deserted as during my previous visit. I was born with an excellent sense of direction, although this time I took a slightly different route to the Children's Hospital. I trotted up St Martin's Lane to Shaftesbury Avenue, then ran along Vernon Place, found Theobald's Road, turned left into Boswell Street, and at Queen Square turned right into Great Ormond Street. The hospital building loomed ahead of me, and I was drawn again towards the bold coloured stripes and bright lights of the entrance, and noticed a statue of Peter Pan on the left as I entered through the main door. I kept a low profile, skirting the walls to avoid detection. I needn't have worried, the same receptionist was still focused on her screen, although I did notice a couple of security cameras swivel round and follow me. The security guard on duty at the time could not believe his eyes when he saw a little Jack Russell trotting through the hospital entrance on the CCTV monitor. He was sure that this was the same little dog he'd seen a couple of nights earlier, who had disappeared from sight once he'd entered the stairwell. The security guard called his boss and instigated a search party to find the dog who had entered the hospital without its owner. Scampering up the stairs 2 at a time, I quickly found Hope on the 4th floor, cute puppy curtains still firmly drawn. Glancing around at the dials on the machines and the squiggles on the charts, there didn't seem to be any change in the condition of the young patient. She looked exactly the same to me, and I doubted she had moved at all. She seemed to have been asleep forever, a bit like a modern-day blonde version of Snow White. Without further ado, I kicked the teddy out of bed and snuggled under the blankets into Hope's side. I held my breath under the blankets when I heard the gruff voice of a man asking the night sister if she'd seen a little dog anywhere on the ward. She replied that she hadn't, and the man went away. I relaxed. I was sure I felt Hope's little body moving to accommodate me, and I responded by snuggling right in. I licked the pale, frail arm which was lying on top of the covers, and I'm certain I felt a flicker of response. Maybe I was imagining it because I really wanted it to happen. We lay like this for several hours, only disturbed by the rounds of the night staff keeping an eye on the sleeping patients and the occasional flash of a torch as the heavy-booted security man continued his search for an evasive little dog that kept appearing on the monitor. I had to keep my wits about me and an ear up to avoid detection. Once again I hid under the bed as soft footsteps approached the puppy curtains. I lifted an ear and heard them saying in hushed tones that Hope's parents were very worried that nothing familiar seemed to bring her out of the coma, and that it had been more than 2 weeks now. Not her teddy, nor her favourite music, nor even stories read aloud by familiar voices. They were at their wits' end and praying for a miracle. Hope was breaking hearts. I resumed my position, snuggled into the little girl's side, and, just before dawn broke, I spotted a tape recorder on the nightstand, and it gave me an idea. I jumped down, replaced the long-suffering bear, and sneaked out of the curtains, leaving as discreetly as I'd come, trying my best not to be detected, and leaving the security man in the control room scratching his head in puzzlement. The next night when I visited, I definitely felt Hope respond when I snuggled in, and then when I licked her face, I believe I saw her eyelids flicker and the merest hint of a smile play on those rosebud lips. These visits continued regularly for the next few nights, with Hope becoming more and more responsive whenever I was at her side. Frustrating to have to wait until midnight to use the Chilvester Passage though, as it only gave me a few hours. On the last night, as I snuggled towards her warm body, she opened her eyes and stared directly at me. I was right, those peepers were as blue as cornflowers. The machine suddenly made a different sound altogether, and I could hear footsteps approaching at a pace. Perhaps the monitors had registered the fact that Hope had regained consciousness. Time to act quickly, Rolo. Make like a tree and leave, I thought to myself. The next day I was in the forest with the smiley lady, off the lead and running freely. Pretending to chase a squirrel, I had the chance to go and have a quick word with Athelstan. Something was troubling me. You know the Chilvester Passage only opens when the clock strikes 12. Well, what would happen if I found a way to record the clock chimes and play them so I could use the passage at different times of the day? Would that work? Well, now, you'll just have to try it and see, little pup, the guardian smiled. Seeing the tape recorder in the hospital had given me the idea. I knew that somewhere in the mess of the box room there was an old cassette recorder which the smiley lady used to record which she used to use to record her singing practice to help her learn her choir songs in the days before she had a smartphone. All I had to do was find it. Whilst the floppy-haired boy was stretched out watching television and the smiley lady was pottering in the garden admiring the new growth, I ran upstairs. Luckily, the box room door was slightly ajar and I only had to push it. The room was full of boxes of junk, all kinds of stuff saved by the smiley lady over the years, school books from her 3 children, certificates, photographs, programmes from concerts and theatre. Where on earth to start? I spied a box which said music and tipped it up, and out fell a jumble of song sheets and the sought-after tape recorder. No time to tidy the box. I had to stow the tape recorder safely somewhere before it was discovered. Unfortunately, the box room door had not been hung on the level and it had swung closed behind me. I was trapped inside the smallest room with the item that I needed so badly. I could hear the smiley lady coming up the stairs calling me. Perhaps she thought I was playing hide and seek. I heard her opening every door, and finally the box room door flew open. I was ready, head down so she couldn't see what I carried in my mouth. I charged into the floppy-haired boy's room next door and shoved the tape recorder under his bed. It was such a mess in there, he'd never notice it. The smiley lady shooed me back downstairs and went back out into the garden. The floppy-haired boy hadn't moved an inch, so I raced back upstairs, picked up the tape recorder in my teeth, brought it downstairs and hid it under the cushion in my doggy bed. Phew, I think I got away with it. That night, when my people had gone to bed, I fiddled with the buttons on the tape recorder. Luckily, the batteries were still working, otherwise that may have been another challenge. A horrid screeching noise came out from the tape recorder. I could only assume it was the smiley lady singing at the top of her voice, but the song was completely unrecognisable. I pressed stop pretty sharpish as I didn't want to wake the house up. Further investigation showed that the red button was for record. I rewound the tape to the beginning and waited for Yulia and the owl to come tapping. I explained through the window what I needed them to do and how to operate the machine, pressing record and play at the same time. Yulia confirmed she understood and would do this for me, but she said that Athelstan had a mission for me. She thought that Dark had light the way through the time tunnel, but I told her not to worry. If she left me her lantern, I could carry it carefully and leave it in the time tunnel for my return. She could then use Dar's lantern and go with the owl to record the chimes of the clock at midnight. I gave her the tape recorder and said it would be useful if she could hide it in the lady chapel at the church. Then it would be in place, ready for my next opportunity to use the Chilvester Passage. Yulia gave me Athelstan's vague instructions to enter the time tunnel and see where it took me. My mission would become evident. Very mysterious indeed. I was just about to enter the foxhole tunnel entrance when I was set upon, thankfully not by a lion dog or a wolf, but by Chickpea. What on earth have you been up to, Rolo? Haven't seen you for ages, she said excitedly as we righted ourselves. I told her I'd been busy, but didn't give away the secret of the Chilvester Passage. I left my pink ball here under the bushes, look, said Chickpea, very pleased with herself. I told her off as it occurred to me that any dog might be able to enter the time tunnel with a pink ball, and we couldn't have that, could we? Imagine if the Dalmatian or a Labrador or any number of other dogs went time travelling. Thankfully, they were all way too big to fit. So I'm just going to jump ahead, miss a chapter because these events are slightly out of sequence. I do want to conclude Hope's story for you. So jumping ahead a little. But first I had something important to do in present time. I had to go back to the hospital and see how Hope was progressing. This would involve using the Chilvester Passage, where at least I would have a chance to test out the recorded chimes. We were watching television. I overheard the smiley lady talking to the floppy-haired boy whilst I sat on her lap. She said she was going to drop him at a friend's house and then she was going out, so I would have to be put to bed early that evening, necessitating an early walk. It suited me just fine, as I was anxious to see Hope. The floppy-haired boy threw a ball for me a few times over the field, and I chased it half-heartedly. I didn't want to wear myself out too much. I saw Chickpea on her lead. We didn't make eye contact. As soon as the car had left the drive, I opened the cupboard door, knocked the bottles and bucket aside under the kitchen sink, and then stopped in my tracks. A key was turning in the front door. "Only me, forgot my skateboard," shouted the floppy-haired boy. Thank goodness I was still in the hall. It was still in the hall where it shouldn't be. Otherwise I might have been caught in the act, emptying the kitchen cupboard. The door banged shut behind him and I heard the key turn and the car pull away again. I climbed into the cupboard and twisted the ring to open the trapdoor. Phew, that was close. I raced the local bus down to the high street in broad daylight. There were quite a few people visiting the redundant church, as there seemed to be a local art exhibition going on. I managed to sneak in through the front door, behind some legs, quite unobserved, and retrieve the tape recorder from where Yulia had hidden it in the lady chapel. Masked by the loud chatter and clatter of cups and saucers in the coffee shop, as the people of Marlborough appraised the amateur depictions of local scenes and still life paintings, I managed to softly play my recording of the 12 chimes, holding my breath in case anyone noticed a Jack Russell beneath the grand piano, waving a tape recorder at the wall. Luck was with me. Amazingly undetected, I entered the Chilvester Passage through the blurry outline of the dog on the wall. I turned off the tape recorder and left it just inside the entrance. It was only late afternoon when I emerged through the Talbot Cafe sign in the shadow of St Martin in the Fields. I turned up St Martin's Lane and set off on my now familiar journey. Thankfully, there were a few trees planted on street corners, so it was possible to relieve myself. I noticed that the streets of London were a lot busier than usual, with traffic and pedestrians. commuters all hurrying in the same direction towards Charing Cross Station on a mission to get home from work. Most had their heads down and their fingers or ears attached to their mobile phones, and a general scrabble to pick up free newspapers from a box on the street corner to read on the train. It suddenly occurred to me that I was much more visible in the daytime. Dogs did not roam freely in the streets of the capital. It also crossed my mind that I could pop into a police station, have a word with the police dogs, and make a statement whilst I was here, killing two birds with one stone. How silly of me. Of course, I would have to travel back in time to 1966 to do that. I followed my nose at quite a pace, dodging pedestrians and traffic and stopping occasionally to water the trees, and before long I was outside the now familiar main entrance to the hospital. I managed to hide in a porter's trolley and soon found myself wheeled inside the foyer. The trolley stopped, as luck would have it, very close to the door which led to the staircase, whilst the porter signed in. There were quite a few people in the hospital because it was still visiting time, and I had to keep my wits about me to avoid detection. Dogs were definitely not allowed in hospitals, and I certainly didn't want that nosy security man picking me up on his CCTV again. Reaching the 4th floor by means of the stairs, I was very concerned when I entered the ward and saw the puppy curtains open, Hope's bed empty and the sheet stripped off it. No sign of her at all. I feared the worst and my tail nearly hit the floor. Fortunately, I couldn't have been more wrong. Keeping my ears open as I hid behind the overflowing waste paper bin in the nurses' station, I learnt that Hope had made a sudden and miraculous recovery from her coma. When she regained consciousness, she had apparently kept on and on to her parents about the little angel dog that had been looking after her in the night time. The doctors and nurses were baffled. They suggested the medication was responsible for her imaginings. Her parents, on the other hand, were just relieved and so delighted to have their precious Hope back that they didn't take too much notice of her ramblings. However, Hope had kept on and on about the angel dog like a stuck record, and eventually her parents had promised they would take her to Dogs Trust to rescue a dog just as soon as she was well enough. I listened to this conversation with a smile and was only sorry that I didn't have the opportunity to meet the little girl of whom I'd grown so fond. I trotted down the corridor with my tail held high in the air. "Mum, that's him. That's my angel dog." I glanced back over my shoulder and saw Hope walking in between her parents, holding their hands. The bear was tucked under her dad's arm. "Come on, Rolo, time for a hasty exit," I told myself as I broke into a trot. Just at that moment, the security guard shouted to his boss that the cheeky little dog was again visible on CCTV, currently on level 4, and I heard him over the walkie-talkie asking whether he should arrange another search party or if they should just concentrate on finding out how he was getting in and out of the building. As the staircase door closed behind me, I heard Hope's dad promise her that they would find an angel dog at Dogs Trust just like me. Well, not quite, I thought. I'm different. There's only one of me. I overheard the crackly voice on the walkie-talkie say to the vigilant security guard, "There's a little girl called Hope on this floor who thinks she's been visited by an angel dog who's been aiding her recovery. The head of the hospital wonders if this angel dog could work some miracles on the other sick children in this hospital. Allow him free passage, as he clearly is a very special little dog." Phew, that cooled them off then. I trotted out past Peter Pan with my head held high. My work here was done for now. Hope had been restored. Quickly away from Great Ormond Street and back to the Talbot Sign Cafe at St Martin's in the Fields. I had to keep my wits about me when crossing the busy roads, as cyclists get very cross when pedestrians dive in front of them instead of waiting for the sign of the green man indicating it's safe for them to cross the road. Sometimes I have to remember to act less like a dog and more like a human. As I exited the Chilvester Passage into the redundant church, and tucked the tape recorder away in the Lady Chapel for future use, I wondered whether I could reach any other churches in London or whether the passage only went from A to B. I must remember to ask Athelstan sometime. So Rolo returned then for the end of the story. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And we shall move away from book 2 tomorrow. I shall read you a chapter from another one of the books in the Secret Adventures of Rolo series. Thank you so much for watching, and if you've missed any of our live recordings, you can find them on YouTube. If you just search for my name, Debbie Evans, hopefully you can find them there. Thank you, and hopefully see you tomorrow at 3:30. Bye for now.